Today I wanted to talk to you about how to have a well-running layout. And in fact, there's three specific areas that I think contribute more to having a well-operating, nicely operating layout more than any of the other things. And unfortunately, these three things are not items that people sometimes spend time on because they want to get to scenery, they want to get to running trains, they want to start weathering locomotives and rolling stock and things. But if you don't spend some time initially in laying the foundation right, then it doesn't matter how nice the rolling stock looks, how nice the engine is, or even how well that single engine or those engines perform. If they're not running on a good quality layout, they're not going to perform well. And unfortunately, this can also lead to a lot of frustration and give people the idea to give up on the hobby and quit doing trains and tear down the layout and say it's just not worth it. But if you spend a little bit more time initially on construction of the layout and setting up a good foundation, then you can have a very nicely operating layout, even if you don't have exactly tuned locomotives and rolling stock on it. Where the reverse isn't true. You can't take great rolling stock locomotives and put them on a bad layout and have them perform well. You can have just sort of out of the box locomotives and rolling stock perform very nicely on a well built layout. And so that's what we're going to look at today. We're talking, there's three areas that I'll talk about that I think are the most important. And actually I'm going to show you part of my layout you've never seen before. Even if you've watched all of my videos, there's part of the layout you've never seen before that you'll see today in this video. So come on, let's have a look. Okay, so there's three areas that I think are important that you spend time on and do things right with when you're building your layout if you expect to have a well-running layout in the future. And unfortunately, two of these areas you aren't even seeing once your layout's built. And so sometimes people don't really spend a lot of time on them. They push through them trying to get to the top part of the layout that you see and operate and are used to interfacing with, and they neglect some of the unseen things, and those unseen things come back to haunt the entire layout. So you're probably wondering now, why am I sitting on the floor? Well, it's because two of these things are actually underneath the layout. So they're wiring and bench work. So let's have a look and I'll show you how I did mine. Okay, so here's my bench work. I don't intend for this video to actually get into all the how to build bench work and show you all the actual techniques I used. But I didn't use anything overly extraordinary. All the techniques I used were in How to Build Model Railroad Bench Work by Lynn Westcott. I think it's in the second edition printing right now. In fact, it may even have a different author listed from the edition that I've got. But it's a good book and a lot of good techniques. I highly recommend you pick it up. As you can see, I used solid plywood tops, 1x4s for the sides of the benchwork, and then 1x3s for the cross beams and horizontal supports. The legs themselves were 2x2s that were 4 to 8 inches long each, which worked out pretty good because they gave me about the layout height I wanted, and I didn't have to bother cutting the legs because they came pre-cut at 4 to 8 inches. And by the time you put the plywood top plus the foam top, it actually raises it up just a few inches more and gets to the height I want. So with each one of these, you got your legs here. Use a horizontal brace at the bottom, keeps your legs a set distance apart. Use a cross beam, at the bottom of one to the top of the other, provides good stability, and to do one on the other side of the legs, going from the top to down there. And that gives you good stability of your layout. It really doesn't move too much. And then the module next to it, another beam. These are set up in modules, so I've got some of my legs are kind of close, and that's okay. One thing you can do with the legs is if you are in tight spaces or don't have really wide aisles, you can actually set the legs in just a little bit from your aisles and things. That way you won't kick them and end up shaking the whole module. So just set them back 4 inches, maybe 6 inches. Ideally, you want your legs as wide as you can, but in the trade-off between having widely spaced legs and legs that get kicked, you want to go ahead and go for non-kicked legs. One other thing you want to do is use high quality, very straight lumber, which actually straight lumber is kind of hard to find anymore. A good portion of the lumber you can get anymore has got all kinds of warps and twists in it. You really want to look for that. Go ahead and pick up your boards and sight down the edge of them, make sure they're not twisted or curved very much. The pine I went ahead and used was considered select pine, which I found was a good balance between quality and price on there. When you're going ahead and assembling them and screwing them together, make sure you always use 2 anchor points at the end of each board. That way it will keep it nice and stable and won't allow it to twist or pivot or rotate underneath anything if the module or your legs start twisting or something. It'll help hold it nice and rigid, which is what you want to see happening. Okay, so that's my first tip on having a good quality running layout is have really good bench work, a real good foundation. Take your time, read about how to make good bench work. There's a lot of good resources out there, whether it's the Lynn Westcott book or other YouTube videos and things. But take your time, don't rush it, do it right, and then that'll make a real good foundation. The second thing that I was going to talk about as far as a good tip to make a good running layout is electrical. You want to spend lots of time and do electrical correctly, just like you want to do your bench work correctly. For your electrical system, what I recommend doing is actually running an electrical bus underneath your layout that carries the power from one portion of your layout to all the other portions of your layout, and then running feeder wires up from terminal joiners that you have spaced out along the layout. For the bus, for HO, what I used was 16 gauge wire. 14 gauge would also work fine, or even 12 gauge probably would be okay. I would not use 18 gauge or anything smaller than the 16 for the bus itself in HO, because the smaller gauge wire, you end up with a lot more resistance, and it's just not designed to carry that much load over that great of a distance. And then that'll run from your DCC system or your power pack to various terminal joiners all along underneath your layout, and then run feeder wires up from the terminal joiners to the track. I go ahead and use the spade connectors for all the feeder wires and things, and then I put feeders about every 5 feet or so. I actually put them very often. I also put them immediately before or after any switches, and that way you get good electrical contact right before, right after all the switches, and you end up with a lot fewer problems of your engines losing power anywhere along the line. Okay, so these terminal blocks I use quite a bit, and they're nice because you can get these jumpers and put them in place and connect them, and you can take these and they break off into smaller ones, and you can get these in different sizes, and then you just slide these in place. Slide those in place, put them down, and that simplifies your wiring quite a bit. And so you don't have to have the entire block. I've got some of them where I split this in the middle, and some I've got where the entire thing is one. So depending on how many, so you can make this all the entire thing, or you can make it a second. And they're nice. And then I use these spade connectors pretty well exclusively, again because they're real nice. Once you have your wires in place, you can hook them in, and it's very easy, and you can change things, manipulate things. It's a very good solid connection, and you don't have to worry about things shorting out. So in this one, if I did it like this, the wire coming in here would be separate than the wire coming in here. This one is only connected to this terminal right now. And so if I put another one of these jumpers to connect these two, I could have these be red and these be black over here if I wanted. So they're real good. And then these are cable stays that I use. I like them because they're not permanent. You can attach them at later points. I've tried it in the past where you go through and drill holes into the sides of your bench work and run the wires through them, and I don't like that actually at all. I like these a lot better. So So that's sort of how I do electrical. So those are the first two tips. Got good quality bench work and good quality wiring. And then the third one is good quality track. And track is a lot more obvious than the other two. I think most people realize that you do need to have good track and everything, but you really got to take your time. Don't rush. I personally like putting down a liquid adhesive. I use liquid nails and put that down in a real thin layer and then put my track on it. It allows me to manipulate and move my track just ever so slightly as it's drying, and I can actually go ahead and run some cars through it and test the track as it's curing and fixing. And unless it's on a real tight curve, you don't have to pin it or anything. I go ahead and I glue my turnouts down as well the same way, and it doesn't interfere with the turnout mechanism at all. I don't put glue directly under the ties that are usually connected to the points of the turnout that move, but all the rest of it I go ahead and glue down. And you want to test your track work a lot during assembly. You want to solder your rail joints. You do want to leave expansion gaps every so often. How many do you need varies greatly depending upon where your layout's located and how much temperature and humidity fluctuations it's going to experience over the years, and whether it's a movable layout or not. But put some expansion joints in every however many feet. Everything. I think on mine I did them about every 10 feet or every 2 modules or so. I had a small expansion gap of about 1 millimeter or so. Haven't had any problems yet, but I'm in a relatively climate controlled basement that doesn't experience a lot of fluctuation, so you may need more than that. Make sure you've got good electrical blocks in there when you do your electrical. Make sure you understand your wiring diagrams, make sure you put down good track, and make sure you build it on top of really good bench work. If you do those three things, you can have a fantastic running layout regardless of how big or how small or how simple or how complex. It'll run well and you'll have a good time enjoying your trains, as opposed to just being one day of frustration after another trying to get your trains to run right. So with that, keep running your trains, keep enjoying them, and we'll catch you in the next